Micah McFadden of the New York Giants suffered a very serious looking leg injury today against the Washington Commanders. And this injury was a very gruesome looking one right off the bat because he was immediately put in an air cast and carted off of the field. Now, as soon as somebody is placed in some sort of immobilizing device like that, everybody starts to think that there is a very serious fracture going on that is extremely unstable. Fortunately, in McFadden's case, we did see him return to the sidelines in a walking boot, and sources have officially come out and said that he had x-rays and that they were negative. So fortunately, in his case, the most serious scenario has been officially ruled out as of right now, but the fact that he was still in a walking boot makes us think that there is some sort of soft tissue involvement. And as we look again at that injury replay, which we will officially do in a few minutes, we see that right ankle buckle and go into a position that is very consistent with something known as a high ankle sprain. High ankle sprains often get confused with what we think of as a typical ankle sprain, so that's something I want to focus on with today's video. I want to also go over the anatomical differences as well as talk about what he should expect in the coming weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. If you're not familiar with me, my name is Nick Gallo and I'm a doctor of physical therapy. And if you enjoy this sort of content, go ahead and hit that thumbs up and subscribe to this channel because I will be making more of these videos in the future regarding sports injuries, rehabilitation, and other physical therapy related content. Also, if you have any comments or questions, please leave those in the comment section below. We see here on the injury replay that as McFadden is going to go in and try to attempt to tackle Austin Eckler, we see that right foot just get caught up underneath of him, and it looks like that ankle is going to buckle inwards. So here I've got my model of the foot and ankle, and so the ankle joint is formed by a number of different bones. The first one being the tibia, also referred to as being the shin bone, that's going to come down and form that inside nodule here known as the medial malleolus. As we look to the outside of the model here, we have the fibula bone that's going to come down and form the outside portion of the ankle, also known as the lateral malleolus. And then as we go inside the model here, there's a bone right there known as the talus bone. Now we'll go over the basic movements at the foot and ankle. The first one is a position known as dorsiflexion, and this is where the foot is going to be pointed upwards like this. The opposite of that is when we're pointing the toes downwards, and it's going to go in something known as plantar flexion. Then as we flip the model this way, the foot rolling inwards in this classic ankle sprain position is known as ankle inversion, and finally the opposite of that is known as ankle eversion. As we take another look on the injury replay, we see that as McFadden is going in for the tackle, he's going to plant on that right foot, and then as his body comes forward, it's a very awkward rotational force going through that lower leg. And you can see that as I do that, so imagine the foot is planting right here, and then we're getting a rotational force going through the lower leg. You can see that the tibia and fibula bones, they want to separate. And so this is greatly going to stress a ligament that is located above the ankle joint. And this is why it's called a high ankle sprain. There are two ligaments that are located immediately above the ankle that are going to prevent this separation. The first one is known as the anterior inferior tibiofibular ligament. So anterior basically means that it's on the front, inferior means that it's lower, and tibiofibular because it's going to attach the tibia and fibula bones. Then we go ahead and flip the model onto the back, and there is a posterior inferior tibiofibular ligament. Posterior is just the opposite of anterior, meaning it's towards the back. Inferior, once again, low, and then tibiofibular because it's going to prevent the separation of those bones. There is something that actually spans both bones all the way in the lower leg, and this is the interosseous membrane. So the bones are also held together by that interosseous membrane as well. Typically what we will see is we'll see that these ligaments are affected, but if the force is great enough, it's going to also affect that interosseous membrane. So we know that any sort of external rotational force going through the foot and ankle is going to try to separate the tibia and fibula bones. Let's talk about why this mechanism differs from a traditional ankle sprain. Typically, what most people will consider as being an ankle sprain is when we're going to roll the foot inwards into inversion. And as I do this, you can see here that it's going to try to separate the talus from that lateral malleolus. And we do have 3 ligaments that are located on the lateral portion of the ankle, so it's really going to stress those. This is known as your classic inversion ankle sprain. You can also suffer something known as an eversion ankle sprain, where the foot is going to go into eversion, so the opposite direction, and that's going to stress the medial ligaments located through here. There's a group of them, and they're known as the deltoid ligaments. So basically, we're seeing that the main difference between the two is the location, because typical ankle sprains are located lower, and then they differ greatly in the mechanism too, because you're not getting any sort of rotational force going through those lower ankle ligaments, but you do for the high ankle sprain. One thing that's important to say though is that there is a legitimate fear for fracture anytime we see somebody go through that rotational force in the lower leg here. If it is great enough, it can lead to either a lateral or medial malleolus fracture. It can also lead to an ankle dislocation where the talus is going to pop out of the joint there. Fortunately, once again, it seems like any sort of serious bone pathology has been ruled out, but there is an obvious legitimate concern as soon as this type of injury happens for something like that. If somebody has a suspected high ankle sprain, there are a couple of examination techniques we can do to basically rule in that injury. The first one is known as a dorsiflexion external rotation test. So basically what we're doing here is we're putting the foot and ankle in the position that would try to separate those ligaments. So very, very similar to the position of injury. Obviously, if this is going to reproduce the person's pain, and the pain is located either anteriorly or posteriorly where those ligaments are located, this will make us believe that they're dealing with a high ankle sprain. And we can also look at that interosseous membrane that goes through the 2 bones. We do that via squeeze test. So we're going to squeeze the 2 bones together. Once again, if pain is produced, this makes us think that the person is dealing with a high ankle sprain. If a normal ankle sprain is suspected, what we're going to do is we're obviously going to palpate either laterally or medially, and then we're going to put him in the point of provocation. So we're going to do something known as a Taylor tilt test. We're going to bring them into inversion if we think that the lateral ligaments are implicated, and vice versa. We're going to put them in eversion if we think that those medial malleolar ligaments are implicated. What generally will happen next after an injury like this, because once fracture is ruled out, they are due to have some sort of advanced imaging so that they can see what is going on with those soft tissue structures. And the gold standard for this is going to be that MRI. And this is where we get into our grading system of ligament injuries. In a grade 1 ligament injury, this is where we're getting basically some microscopic tearing of the affected ligament. In a grade 2, this is where we're getting more tearing, but it's considered a partial tear, so the entire ligament is not ruptured. And finally, in a grade 3, this is a full rupture of the affected ligament. Obviously, worst case scenario, and usually surgical intervention is required in this case because the joint is going to have usually a lot of instability. So if a high ankle sprain is diagnosed in this case, which based on the injury replay, it looks like it is the very typical mechanism for this. So that is my guess as of right now seeing that video. If a person has suffered a grade 1, this can take anywhere from about 4 to 6 weeks. In a grade 2, this can take anywhere from about 6 to 8. And finally, a grade 3, once again, worst case scenario, takes many months because it requires surgical repair. So we'll wait and we will hopefully get the results of that MRI advanced imaging somewhere in the near future. If I happen to hear any updates, I'll be sure to update everybody in the comment section. Also, if you happen to hear anything, please feel free to update us as well. So we wish Micah McFadden the best of luck moving forward regarding this injury. Once again, he dodged a major bullet here by having the fracture ruled out, but it looks like moving forward, we're going to basically need to see what soft tissue structures are implicated in this injury to get an accurate timeline for him to return. Thank you so much for watching my video today. Once again, if you really enjoy this sort of content, I'm going to go ahead and link one of my playlists so that you can watch some of the injuries that I've talked about in the past. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.